And so now we're being recorded. So it's my great pleasure to welcome Richard. He's worked, I forgot to look up before the second, for quite a few years in the energy industry, and he's also part of Sustainable Hayfield. And as I'm sure many of you know, if we all went over to low carbon heating and transport tomorrow, the grid couldn't cope. So Richard's talking to us about the future of the grid and possible, well, I think it's called barriers and opportunities, isn't it? So I'll let you take it away.
Thank you very much, Sneezy. Right, can I check that you can see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so
just one more thing before you start. If everybody could mute themselves apart from Richard, it saves having more background noise. And if anybody wants to turn their video off at this point, this is the point to do so too. Great. Over you.
Thank you very much. Right, so welcome to session tonight. The title of the session is The Future of Electricity, Barriers and Opportunities. So basically I've got tea leaves out and I'm trying to paint a picture of you know, the direction of travel in terms of the electricity market, the electricity services, and the impact of the changes that are definitely coming on consumers and businesses in the UK and around the world. This is clearly a global initiative that we're just about to enter. I'm absolutely confident I'm going to learn some things tonight. I hope there'll be some new things here to take away for everybody. I've met one of two of you before. Hello, Michael. So only a few, so I don't really know where everybody is up to in terms of understanding what's happening in the electricity marketplace over the coming years. So there's a little bit of the discussion to start with, maybe a little bit of recap and just get everybody on the same page. Probably a lot of you will know some of the material. I've got a particular perspective that comes from my profession. So let's begin and just some introductions. So majority of you, I don't think we've met. So my claims to fame are firstly working with Sustainable Hayfield for the last 6 or 7 years. I'm chairman of the energy group. It's about 6 of us who have been working for quite a while, trying to push on the energy aspects of sustainability in the parish of Hayfield. 2 projects, recent projects that are relevant, I guess. We've undertaken a solar farm feasibility study funded by one of the government quangos, about £36,000 to establish the feasibility of a 5 megawatt solar farm within the parish of Hayfield. That ground to a sudden halt when 2 things were established. We wouldn't get planning permission under the current planning regulations, and we wouldn't be able to fund the connection of the solar farm to the grid under the current regulations. So some big lessons learned there on both those angles. We've put that on the shelf and hopefully we're going to return to that. Second one, residential energy MOT with a company called MEA. And that's basically working with the parishioners of Hayfield to reduce their energy consumption, their energy costs through retrofit of simple measures to make their dwellings more energy efficient. So we've got the big picture solar farm and the the grassroots. Let's improve the energy efficiency of individual homes. So I'm not going to talk too much about those today, but that's the sort of spread of activities we've been involved in sustainable hayfield. On the other side of the fence, my work life, I work for Electricity Northwest. They're a distribution network operator, and I think in Hope Valley, the equivalent company is Western Power Distribution. They're a DNO as well. So we are geographic monopolies, where we make sure the cables and transformers and all the assets are working correctly and delivering electricity to residential and commercial properties. But as you'll see in the coming years, the role of the DNO is going to change significantly as we head off towards net zero. So with Electricity Northwest, three sort of aspects of my job. I'm responsible for the systems, that's information systems strategy, to take the north and west of England to net zero by 2050. I'm the IT architect or designer for our smart meter rollout, because we are using smart meters significantly now to help us manage our distribution network, and also looking at the impact of low carbon technologies on our asset base. So these are solar farms, solar panels, wind farms, electric vehicles, heat pumps, anything that's low carbon, the new stuff that's coming in through the electrification of the UK. So that's my background. I don't know everything, clearly. I'm hoping to learn things tonight as well, but hopefully we'll have a good conversation. So the way this was publicized, basically trying to establish the idea that we are just about to enter a major transformation in the electricity, well, the energy market, but more specifically for tonight, the electricity market, something that's not been seen for 30 years or more. So this is generational change. The electricity marketplace is notorious for being glacial in terms of the changes that have taken place. So the technologies that are in place in a lot of premises and businesses in the UK were designed hundreds of years ago. They were built by corporations. Manchester Corporation sort of built the electricity grid. Bolton Corporation will have built their own grid as well. So not a lot of change until there were some market changes in the 90s, where we saw suppliers and distribution companies being split. But this change we're just about to undertake is probably more significant than the changes that were in the 90s, and that's great opportunities but great challenges, both to the companies in the marketplace and the service users, you and me, residential customers, commercial customers. But a lot of the changes are very much targeted at net zero, whether that be a 2050 target, whether that be a 2038 target, as in Greater Manchester Combined Authority. So it's rapid change, and there will be winners and losers as ever in change. So big challenges to us as customers. We're going to have power cuts. I think it's just going to be a fact of life. We will have to plan and become used to having power cuts. The National Grid today announced that their original suggestion that tomorrow, Tuesday, there will be power cuts. They've pulled back from that today and said there won't be power cuts tomorrow. So no, as a business, Electricity Northwest, we are absolutely geared up for power cuts in January. If we have a very cold January, we're expecting power cuts. So significant changes and challenges, particularly to vulnerable people, as we make this transition. Transition always has casualties, yeah, and they have to be minimised. So the talk's going to shed light on what those challenges are, but what should we be looking out for to navigate the disruption and the opportunities? So I just wanted to grab people's interest. You know, this is very relevant to millions of people around the UK, and my view, personal view, is life won't be as we've had it for the last 50 years, other than when I did my O-levels in 1974, when we had lots of power cuts through the miners' strike. Yeah, so that's the sort of life we may be more used to as we go through this change. Okay, let's see if I can get this to move on to the next slide. Not yet. There we go. So a little bit of revision. I guess we're all familiar with this. So if we look at heading to net zero for 2050, we've got some significant reduction in carbon. These are massive changes in across multiple industries: transport, manufacturing industry, the power industry, land use. So we're talking about 15% per annum, year-on-year reduction in carbon, which is huge. And the thing that struck me during COVID and lockdown was you went into Manchester in the early sort of April, May time in 2020, no cars, no people, it was empty. Yeah, and the net impact on carbon was estimated to be 10%, only 10% reduction. But we have to reduce year on year 15% our carbon emissions. Yeah, when you look at it that way, then no, that is clearly a huge change to society. So why do we want to electrify the UK? Yeah, because it is a vehicle for getting us to our target of 2050 net zero. But what will we need to do? So these are obvious, but very, very difficult. Yeah. Reduction in carbon emissions through reduction in the use of high carbon assets. So electricity generation, transportation, heating, cooking. So these all need to be reduced or eliminated. And you can see in the future there are, there's signposts. There are, the car manufacturers won't be producing diesel or petrol cars in the coming years. We've set dates for when that will happen. So significant change, massive change, something we've never seen before, other than equivalent scale change like COVID, Brexit. It's another one on the stack of change that we keep going through. But how will we achieve it? And I think this is really quite important. Now we're going to use electric cooking. We've got electric cars, electric fans, electric this, that, and the other, air source heat pumps, which are £14,000 each, all that good stuff. So replacing our carbon emitting assets with low carbon assets is one aspect, one piece of the toolkit we've got. But clearly there are these things that I think we all probably are familiar with and would support and are advocating. So we need to reduce, we need to share things more, we need to repair things, we need to reuse things, we need to recycle, the circular economy type things that have to happen. And then we need to replace things as well, because we know the act of buying an electric fan means you're generating carbon in the manufacturing process right now. In the future, if the manufacturing process is low carbon itself, then that's less of an issue, but it isn't today. Yeah. So I put the replacing at the back of the queue. Yeah, we should be doing this. But our politicians, and I'm not going to get into politics today, our politicians are not talking about reducing, they're talking about growing. Growth. It's got to grow, green growth. Yeah. But actually, if we're going to hit 2050, we've got to reduce. And that's a major challenge for a politician. So replace high carbon tech with low carbon tech, LCTs, low carbon technologies. We use LCTs, a lot in Electricity Northwest, because that's the biggest challenge we have in the rate at which LCTs are going to connect to our network, our distribution network. Generation, we know the debacle around nuclear. We just haven't had a plan. We sort of have a plan, but then we're not sure we got a plan for nuclear. It's important based generation that needs to give us stability. And we're familiar with hydro, solar, wind. Wind is sort of starting to be very, very significant. Depends very much where you are in the country, and it's easy to generalize about this stuff. But if you're in the north of Scotland, wind is really important. Solar, very rare. If you're down in Torquay, solar is very important. Wind, not so important. If you're in the northwest of England, the electricity grid, the distribution grid, has got a huge amount of spare capacity because we've shut all the manufacturing processes and businesses. If you're on Teesside, the electricity grid on Teesside has got huge capacity, because of all the heavy industry that has closed down. So we shouldn't generalize in terms of, you see the Facebook stuff that says, we can't do this because we can't convert to electric vehicles because the grid won't cope with it. That's probably the case in certain parts of the country, but not in Teesside and not in the northwest of England, because there's lots of spare capacity on the grid. Clearly, transportation, everything electrical. I think this will take its own. The transport transition to electricity will take its own build its own momentum. Now, today you find it difficult to find somewhere that's available to charge your car. Once we get through the tipping point where it's cheaper to buy electric vehicle and it's more convenient to charge your car than it is to find a petrol station, because petrol stations are going to close. As soon as the electric vehicle overtakes, the business model for petrol stations with diesel and petrol will disappear. So it'll flip. The view in the industry is we're going to flip from diesel and petrol to electric very, very quickly, and that's a scary thing for companies like Electricity Northwest and Western Power Distribution. The rate of change, that's gradual change, is easily manageable. Step change is hard. And if you remember what happened when iPhone actually got it, Apple got the iPhone right with the network bandwidth, the form factor, and the usability of the iPhone. The iPhone just absolutely took off. Prior to the iPhone, there were all sorts of phones which were computers that were phones, and they were clunky, very expensive, and they didn't work. But when the iPhone arrived, the whole industry just went through the roof, and it's predicted that electric vehicles will do the same. And that's the rate of change is the challenge for the marketplace. Heating, I think, is one of the hardest things that we're going to have to resolve. The engineers and the scientists are going to have to come up with something better than an air source heat pump or a ground source heat pump in terms of cost and effectiveness, in terms of millions of properties around the country. And I think that's one of the biggest gaps we have at the moment. Cooking with electricity is reasonably easy to understand. Removing gas cooking is not that difficult to comprehend. So that's how we need to do this. So just in terms of opening the box and having a look inside the marketplace, what's the market background? This isn't something that millions of consumers need to understand, but it's worth just understanding the nuts and bolts of how the marketplace works today, because that you can see then what are the things that are going to have to happen to make sure we get to net zero and we can handle this surge in electric vehicles that is predicted. So there's three parts of the marketplace. There's a national grid who are responsible for ensuring we've got enough generation to match the demand second by second. So they got, you'll have seen the TV sort of images of the big control center where they're monitoring what's being generated from the big power stations and estimated from our solar panel on our roof, and matching that up with the expected demand. And their number one measure is the frequency, the 50 hertz frequency of the AC supply. And they've got a regulatory responsibility to make sure the frequency stays within a very, very tight band around 50 hertz. Because anything, if you go too high or too low on frequency, your appliances catch fire and stop working and things. Yeah, so they all the time they're monitoring the frequency of the alternating current, and they do that by balancing the generation with demand. If there's too much generation, the frequency goes high. If there's too little generation, the frequency goes low. So they're continually, they've got a number of techniques to how they can do that. But that's their number one objective. They keep the lights on, and tomorrow they were predicting we weren't going to have enough generation, primarily because we buy electricity from France, and France has got a problem with some of their nuclear, and we weren't going to be able to buy enough electricity generation from France tomorrow. So they were setting expectations that there were going to be power cuts tomorrow. So that's their number one role. These guys here, the suppliers, the people we buy electricity from, so gas, British Gas or E.ON or EDF, no, all they do, they buy a load of computers and they buy and sell electricity. Yeah, so they have a call center and a billing system. So they don't have a big role in the actual grid itself, other than the amount of electricity that gets sold and the amount they buy off the marketplace. But as you'll see, this pound sign here is going to be absolutely critical. And then we got the DNOs, distribution network operators, and there's 6 of them in 14 geographic regions, and Electricity Northwest is one of those. Some of the DNOs own 2 or 3 of the geographic regions. They're monopolies and under heavy regulation. But they've got 2 responsibilities. They have to keep the lights on. Yeah, so power cuts are down to the DNOs. That if there's a power cut, it means part of the network infrastructure of the DNO, the transformer or the overhead cables, has failed. Yeah, so that they're measured heavily and fined and penalized on power cuts. But also they have to make sure that their assets don't overload and get hot. Okay, so you got a transformer, you will have a transformer somewhere near your house somewhere with about 100 houses connected to it. They have to make sure that transformer does not overheat. Yeah, and if you connect too many electric vehicles onto your part of that network, that transformer could overheat. Yeah, so they have a responsibility to make sure that those assets don't overload. And if they do overload, that means the life of that asset can be shorter than it should be. So we have to spend more money on it, and so we have to charge customers more for mismanagement. So these are the three major players, plus the customers, of course, in the marketplace. So I work for Electricity Northwest, DNO. Your local one is Western Power Distribution. So I had a quick look yesterday at what was happening in the UK, because it was quite an interesting day, very different to today. So this information, anybody can get this information. It's on this link here. If you just click on that, you can see what's happened in the last 24 hours in terms of what was the consumption, the actual consumption of electricity in the UK over the last 24 hours, and where did the generation associated with that consumption, where did it come from? So you can see yesterday, there was at the start of the day, majority of our generation came from the wind farms, with quite a significant proportion from gas. But as we went through the day, this is the lunchtime. Sorry, this is the afternoon low point. This is lunchtime. This is the tea time. Around sort of mid-afternoon, we reduced our gas generation. The wind reduced, but our overall consumption reduced as well. But as we went into tea time, the typical tea time peak is shown, and the way we compensated yesterday, because the wind generation was reducing because presumably the pressure was rising, and less wind, we had to ramp up the gas. So a big chunk of gas generation towards tea time. And the impact of that on our carbon, you can see here, when we have low consumption, we have low carbon generated. When we have high consumption, we have high amounts of carbon being generated. So 300, I think that's grams per kilowatt hour, I'm not sure. That's pretty high. And this is the crucial thing, you can see that the actual cost of electricity follows the same pattern. So when there's a high demand for electricity, which is high carbon, you get high prices. So this is every half an hour. The price on the market, because the market works in half hours, you see the price goes high. When it's black, that's very high. Today, the price, I had looked earlier, the price today, there was a peak at 6:30 tonight, where the price on the market was 10 times the price at, I think it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So it's a massive difference in the price on the wholesale market. And this is the big change that's just about to hit us. We, as consumers, we are sheltered from this price variation every half an hour on the wholesale market. We just get a price per unit that's flat for the length of your tariff. So it might be a 2-year tariff and it's fixed, or you may be on a variable tariff where it changes perhaps once every 6 months or something. The big change that's come in is that we are going to be exposed to this price change. So our tariffs from our suppliers like British Gas or Octopus or wherever it is will vary every half an hour if you have a smart meter. So smart meters is it gets a lot of bad press, but the actual fact of the matter is we won't hit net zero without smart meters. It will be impossible to achieve net zero without a smart meter, because without a smart meter you can't understand the impact, the relationship between the price and the carbon. Yeah, and how that changes depending on what generation type you have. If you've got low carbon generation or high carbon generation, clearly we've got to get rid of this big chunk here of gas. This is generating carbon willy-nilly. It's huge. Yeah. So we have to move consumption away from these high peaks. And that's the sort of changes we have to prepare for. Just quickly, if you're interested to see this is the live national grid map that shows the current carbon emissions across a large number of countries, not every country right now. So this over here shows us in the UK where our generation is coming from, and right now, we got a reasonable chunk of the base load from nuclear that's always there. That should be increasing as we build more power stations. Right now, we've got hardly any wind. Yeah, this is quite high for coal. We've switched on a load of coal today, so we're generating electricity from old coal-fired power stations. We're currently at 383 grams, which is very high for carbon intensity. And we've got a lot of gas. Now, the majority of our electricity right now is being generated through gas-fired power stations. So that's the UK right as it is now. This is over here. This is Norway. They're 23 grams carbon intensity compared to our 380, and that's because they've got huge amounts of hydro. Majority of their generation comes from hydro. And here's the naughty boy of Europe, Poland, who are 862 grams. And that's because majority of Poland energy comes from coal. So very interesting to look at that. These here show that we're actually importing low carbon electricity from Norway right now. So 1.4 gigawatts of energy is coming from Norway. At the moment, we are taking 2.5 gigawatts from France at 168. Yeah. So I think tomorrow that's going to change, and we may be exporting to France tomorrow. So this is the import export. Sorry, let's do the UK one rather than the Polish one. So this is Great Britain import export. Sorry. So I can get to it. Oh, it's missing at the moment. Sorry, they're not showing it. Oh, there it is. Sorry. So we're importing a lot of low carbon electricity from Norway, some high carbon electricity from the Netherlands, and some reasonable electricity from low carbon intensity from France. But sometimes we export depending on the nature of the each country. So this is an important combination of our consumption generation, our carbon intensity, and our cost. Yeah, and we clearly have to reduce our carbon intensity much lower than this 100. We need to get much lower, down to 29 of Norway. Yeah, and we're today we've been up at 300. So basically, what does that mean? This is a great example back in November 2015, where it showed during a day, every half an hour, how much electricity costed. So is pounds per megawatt hour. So the price of electricity on the marketplace on this particular day, because we had very, very high demand and low generation. November, it sounds like it was a very calm, dull day with cold, and so everybody switched the heating on, and the price just goes through the roof. So what we have to do, remember, when it goes high price, it's high carbon. So we have to shift the usage out of that peak and into other parts of the day. And this is an example back from 2020 of Octopus, the retailer, a supplier, and they trialed this tariff. So it doesn't match the same day as this, but an example of in a trial. So 2:30 in the morning till 3 o'clock, minus 4.8 pence per kilowatt hour. So you get paid by Octopus if you use electricity at that time. And it went up to 9 pence. You get paid 9 pence per kilowatt hour between 5:30 and 6. So that's to incentivize people, consumers, to use electricity at off-peak times in half-hour slots. Now, clearly, nobody's going to stay up awake at 5 in the morning and put things on depending on the price of electricity. So no, this is something that is a key enabler to achieving what we need to achieve, which is shifting these peaks into the rest of the day. So you may have seen on the 15th of November, so last week before last, National Grid launched their trials of reduction at peak time. So they in the trial, they pay the suppliers to reduce the demand or reduce the consumption at this 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock. This was on a Tuesday. I'm with Octopus Energy, so I signed up to it. So the deal was, if I reduce my demand by 1 kilowatt hour compared to the average consumption of the last 10 days in that hour, they would give me £2.50. So I thought, that's an interesting little trial. I'll do that. So this is my my meter readings that I get from Octopus on the 15th of November, and this is the half hour before, and then the 2 half hours within that slot. So I went around and switched everything off in the house, and I reduced my consumption significantly. But when I looked at it, I thought, well, brilliant, I've just earned £2.50, but I didn't. Yes, because my average consumption over the last 10 days was not more than 1 kilowatt hour than that. Yeah, because that's not that actual slot for me isn't my peak usage. My peak usage, as you can see, is either side of it. I would have been somewhere around here on a normal day, but my peak usage, me personally, is either side. So that's an important indicator of the demographics of how people will respond to price, either being paid to switch things off, or costing you more if you leave things on. Yeah. But interestingly, and I thought this was encouraging, 200,000 Octopus consumers actually participated and went around their house switching everything off. Yeah, and that resulted in 108 megawatts of reduction, and that's the equivalent of a medium-sized gas-powered fired power station. Yeah, so Octopus have probably got 5 million customers. So this is quite a small proportion of their customers having a major impact manually going switching things off. So it's good to start new things manually to understand how they work, but no, I'm not doing that exercise again, because I switched my freezer off, I switched so many things off, which I have to switch back on again afterwards. No, that is not going to be the way I live my life, manually switching things off. So I wanted to just give a bit of understanding in terms of what this means from a DNO perspective. So I made the sort of statement to get some interest and attention that said, other media stuff about, we can't go to electric vehicles because the grid can't cope with it. Yeah? So basically, what we at Electricity Northwest, the way we look at this is, if this is the situation when we had the old monthly meter reads, you had the meter reader come around, or your monthly meter read, or you phoned in your meter reading once a month, then you got billed on it. So that information that said you use so many kilowatt hours in that month it isn't very useful to a company like Electricity Northwest, because we have to predict how much load there's going to be to stop the assets from overheating. Yes, so our prediction, the actual standard deviation, if you like, the room for error in that prediction means that if we take a standard load profile, that's breakfast, that's lunch, that's tea time, we have so little information. It's like having a 10 pixel camera rather than a 10 megapixel camera. The plus or minus deviation error of that peak is huge. Yes, because we just don't have the data on monthly reads to allow us to work out how much capacity is in a cable. Imagine this represents the capacity of a cable that goes down the middle of your road. So what we need is much more. We need 10 megapixels rather than 10 pixels. Yeah? So when we have smart meter reads, the accuracy of our prediction is much better. So the room for error is a lot smaller, which means we can put more electricity down that cable. Yeah, so we can push it up there without having to add more cables. Yeah, so that's if we don't change the shape of this thing. So that the smart meters gives us a lot more control and allows us to push the amount of electricity through the cables much higher, and hence we don't have to put in a lot more capacity to handle the growth in electric vehicles, for example. But then if you add on top of that the load shifting, so we flatten these peaks and push the load into other parts of the day, we can push it up even higher. Yeah. So we've got lots of spare capacity most of the day. Most of the cabling and the assets are 5% utilized during the day. And then they go up to probably about 50% utilized on monthly readings, but we could push it up to 80% with smart meter reads. So that's the importance of the smart meter, and the incredibly bad press you see about them is understandable because nobody's ever seen any benefit from it. We're coming now to the point where the benefit will materialize, and the criticality of the smart meters will become obvious. So what are the opportunities? So this is basically articulating where we can get to and where we need to get to. Opportunities both financially for a consumer, are environmentally for a consumer in terms of carbon reduction, and convenience as well. So the reforms that are taking place in the marketplace today to deliver half-hourly, to put the marketplace on a half-hourly footing, which is basically where we're heading, enabled by smart meters, but with half-hourly billing and forecasting systems. That half-hourly pricing that Octopus and others have launched, plus the local generation, and to me, local generation, the way you should be thinking about local generation is, if you buy bananas from the West Indies, yeah, you're creating a big carbon footprint. Yeah, because it's got to fly it over. If you're buying electricity from Sizewell B, you're generating carbon. Yeah, because that electricity's got to travel all the way to your house. Yeah, and you electricity warms up cables, you lose energy, there's big losses. So local generation is a really important aspect of reducing our carbon footprint. The local storage allows us to buy electricity at 3 in the morning and use it at 5 at tea time. Yeah, when we want to flatten those curves. The half-hourly meter reads from the smart meter allows us to be billed every half an hour, and on the basis that everybody else on this session today doesn't want to go around at 3 in the morning switching stuff on and off, then you've got to have this automated. Every 30 minutes, there's got to be a home management system, energy management system that says, right, the next 30 minutes, the price of electricity is that. I've got that amount stored in my storage or my car. Yeah, because the car has a big battery. Yeah, you can store electricity and take electricity from a car into your home. And I want to get paid on the half-hourly meter reads that the smart meter is going to do at 2 in the morning. So what does this mean? It means we can use batteries, our battery storage, which includes the electric vehicle, to power electrical devices when electricity is expensive. Yeah, so at that peak time, so we reduce our carbon and reduce our costs. We can recharge the battery from solar or when electricity is low carbon and cheap. Yeah, so we get paid to charge our car at 3 in the morning. And we can shift the use of electric devices to when electricity is low carbon and cheap. Yeah, so that's that balancing of the grid. So the national grid needs to keep the frequency at 50 hertz. Yeah, that's how we can do it. Electricity Northwest can stop their assets from overheating and burning out. This is how we're going to do it. So the challenges. So great challenges. Electric heating. There isn't a mass market solution that's going to work yet. Air source and ground source heat pumps, major issues in terms of cost. 14,000. I'm sure it'll come down, but what the experience isn't great. You may have to change your radiators. You may not get the heat in the time you need it. The costs of home energy management, or the home energy management system, the controller that makes those decisions about what's the price of electricity in the next half hour. The electric vehicle tipping point. It's ramping up now pretty quick, and that's the precursor to the tipping point, because it's just going to flip. At some point, it will be uneconomic, inconvenient to buy a diesel or petrol engine car, and you won't be able to at some point. Letting go of the gas generation. Yeah, so gas generation is our main source of electricity at the moment. I was going to say a guaranteed generation, but actually it's not, is it? Since Ukraine, the issues in January that are coming up, if we have a very cold January, is that we haven't got the gas to put into the gas generators. Yeah, we're running out of gas because we don't have the storage, the month-long storage. We only have 3 days of gas storage, but we have to let go of that. We've got rid of most of the coal, but we're going to have to get rid of the gas, but without power cuts. And that's why I'm saying, this thing is so unpredictable because we haven't got 10 years of data as to how this all works. We're going to trip up and we're going to have power cuts, and it's going to become quite normal. And hydrogen solution for gas replacement. There's replacement for gas, hydrogen. It could be. There's no clear strategy yet. Okay, so that's what I wanted to cover today. I can't see if there's loads of questions. I don't know, it's easy. Could you just check for me if there are questions, or do you want to be the orchestrator of any questions or discussion points we want to to take on now?
Now, oh, I know, it's in reactions. No, reactions is just raise a hand.
Yeah, if anybody's raised a hand, then that's, or
Um,
is anything in the chat?
If you could take your screen away, then there's no questions in the chat at this second. We'll be able to see. No, there's no hands raised at this second, but I'm sure there will be some questions. Michael.
Hi, Michael.
Hello. Yeah, thank you, Richard. That was really, really good presentation, I thought. I have a couple of questions, but I'm just going to go with one for now. On the Octopus sort of trial with negative pricing tariffs,
Yeah.
Negative pricing feels quite dangerous, because if I was being paid to use energy, well, I'll go to sleep and I'll leave all the lights on in the house. I'll open the fridge door. I'll, do whatever, which doesn't feel quite right.
Yeah, you're right.
A zero price, use as much energy as you can usefully, because it won't cost you anything. It seems like a better solution.
Yes. Yeah, I'd agree. I think this is a complex set of equations. Yeah, there's human psychology. There's people who just want to make money, or a better way of thinking about it, people who can't afford electricity. Yes, so we've got 70 million people in this country who are going to react in 70 million different ways to this. And I agree with what you say. There's no point in opening your freezer door. Yeah, that's not the way to do it. But you could make money by doing that. Yeah. This is all going to be a bit of a novelty. We're in a really early adopter stage, if you can use the maturity curve, early adopter. There's an argument: you fail fast, you try things quickly. That failed. Yeah, everybody opened their freezer door. That wasn't the point. That wasn't what we're trying to do. So we rethink again, and this is going to take a while. Yeah, we haven't got very long. 2050 is hurtling down the track at us. Yeah, but we have to work out how these things end up delivering the outcome we need, which is reduction in carbon. And at the moment, the world believes that the pricing policy, time of use tariffs, changing the price every 30 minutes, is the big lever for achieving this, which may be the case. That there are other ways. So we at Electricity Northwest and the other Western Power, they have the same. We have contracts with big manufacturing companies where when the assets are starting to overheat, we pay them to switch off a production line. Yeah, they signed up to what is called a variable connection that said, we won't charge you so much for this connection, but you have to be prepared to switch off a production line. So there are other techniques, but I do think that Octopus trial, we got a decent sized gas generator switched off, with only 200,000 customers. Yeah, there's 30 million electricity consumers in the UK. So that, to me, I was very surprised of that reaction. Yeah, now there's a huge number of demographics, segments of the population. We're all going to react differently and for different reasons. So some people, I've got a mate who's really wealthy. He buys all the toys and he's got all that home and control stuff in place now. Yeah, he doesn't need to, because he's got so much money to spend £20,000 on that sort of stuff. So he hasn't done it to reduce cost or reduce carbon. It's basically to show off. Look what I've got in my fancy pad. Yeah. So there's lots of people do things for different reasons, and that's, to me, these are lessons that are going to be learned over 2 or 3 years to understand what really, really works for people and achieves the outcome. Now, we don't want everybody's freezer door open. Now, we want people charging their electric vehicles at 3 in the morning. yeah, or charging their batteries, their home batteries, that sort of thing. Yeah, I agree with you. This isn't going to be straightforward, and that's why I say we are going to become used to having power cuts because we have that's going to drive all this. Yeah. It's not mature enough at the moment. Sorry. Yep.
I was going to say thank you. Well, actually, you froze for a second, so I wasn't sure whether you were still speaking or finished your comment. I see Dave has his hand up, and several people, quite a lot of people, are starting to put their questions into the chat rather than say them themselves. So maybe I should take 2 or 3 at the time. Let's have Dave's, and then I'll take a couple from the chat, and then
yeah.
I was just going to say that I'm part of a crowd charge test with Western Power.
Yeah.
And I use the Octopus tariff.
Okay.
I charge my van up and discharge the van.
Okay.
I run the house off the van all day long.
Brilliant.
And then charge it up at 12:30
at
night. And that's working very well.
Yes.
And when the software is working really well, then I'll switch to the half-hour import-export.
Yeah.
But lots of people have done it, and they're actually making a significant amount of money out of it.
Okay.
Charging
how much do you reckon?
Their vehicles.
How much do you think, roughly, ballpark?
I think some of them are looking at sort of £1,000 a year.
Okay.
Estimated.
Yeah.
But at the moment, I'm not sure that the software is stable enough.
Exactly.
And also, I'm concerned that my £6,000 inverter that I'm not sure whether it can cope with 7 kilowatts. Discharge, recharge.
Yeah.
So I'm concerned, and the vehicle itself.
Sure.
Because obviously not going to be fully warranted against.
Yes, of course. Because you're cycling the battery more than it's designed for.
From what I understand, the batteries won't suffer from mid-cycling.
Okay.
But it is working very well for all of the people that I'm aware of on this trial.
Right. That's great news. I've not had that feedback before. What I've talked about is theoretical, but what you've just said there is saying, well, actually, this I'm working really early days into this. Yeah, this is step one of about 100 steps we got to go through, and to hear that is really encouraging.
I'm expecting the biggest gains to be made in these early days, because once everybody's got storage, it only takes everybody saving a little bit, and they can't offer a negative tariff anymore.
Yeah.
So,
it will balance.
But all power to everybody's elbow that's doing it in the early days.
Very good. Yeah.
There's also a question about what role does long-term storage, e.g. compressed air or hydrogen, have?
I think long-term storage, I think of as similar to the pump storage systems, in Wales, North Wales, where we pump up the water to the top lake when electricity is cheap, and then we generate at those peak times. So that's a sort of an example of a long term. Depends what your frame is on that. So we're storing it away. We're storing our energy away at the top of the mountain, such that we can bring it back down again. Longer term, I suspect that's what was meant by the question. We're storing it for days or weeks, maybe. Similar to storing gas we used to store gas for 30 days, 30 days supply, didn't we? In the gas storage areas, but we're now down to 3 days. So I think the idea of having longer term storage as a sort of, not quite the same as base load, but it's there, you can bring it in when required, I think is going to be part of this picture. There are many, many parts of the picture, and I don't think we even know all the parts yet.
Do you think there's a role for generating lots of solar power in the summer and saving it for 6 months to the winter, or is that
Yes, yes. At the end of the day, it's energy, isn't it? What's somebody's first law? Energy can either be created or destroyed. It's energy. So it goes. You always have it. It just gets sort of spread across the universe if you don't manage it properly. Yeah.
Well, and also the systems for storing it use, for example, in Wales, just pumping it up to the mountain.
Yes.
The pump takes energy, and so you don't get as much back coming down.
Yeah. But bear in mind, there is this really crazy situation right now in the way the markets work. Is if there's too much wind coming off the North Sea, wind generated energy, then we have to pay the generator to switch it off.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah.
So does that apply to people's solar on roofs?
No, I don't think so. No, it's just the big generators that could destroy the grid. Yeah, because you've got too much generation coming into Scotland off the North Sea. The electricity grid can't cope with it. Yeah, unless you've got people using it. Yeah, so where there's too much generation, the frequency goes high. Yeah, and the network goes unstable. So at those times, we should be storing that electricity, wherever we can. Yeah.
I'm going to do a follow-up to this before taking another couple of questions from the chat. I'm going to use the chairman's role to be able to add solar on roofs. You mentioned local generation. Well, the obvious easiest one is solar on roofs. But firstly, the amount of solar you get in winter is so little compared to summer, and summer isn't when you want it.
Yes, I agree.
And secondly, if the grid has enough electricity from other sources, whose roofs aren't going to get used?
Yeah, so the way to look at it is your solar panel just reduces your demand for electricity. So you become just think of yourself as being off grid. Yeah, you're disconnected from the grid. You're self-sufficient. You got energy. This is in the summer. Yes. Your point is what happens in winter. Yeah. But if you start thinking about being off grid, and that's the logical end point. Yes. Local
many
generation.
people in the summer are not just off grid. They're pouring electricity into the grid, aren't they?
They are. Yes. No. Absolutely right. But the way to think about solar generation, residential solar generation, is you're reducing your demand of the grid rather than selling everything to the grid. Yes, it's from a DNO perspective. We don't actually know whether you're just switched things off or whether you're using your solar energy off your solar panel. Yeah, all we can see is a lower amount of consumption. Yeah. So the way to think about the solar panels is it just reduces your demand on the grid. And if you had a solar panel that was producing enough energy all year round for your home, then reliably, then you'd be off grid. Yeah. And if you take that to its logical conclusion, the electricity, the distribution grid into your home would only be used in unusual circumstances, and companies like Electricity Northwest would not be viable, because their revenues are driven by the amount of electricity that gets pumped into houses. So there's an end point there that says, they probably need to be nationalised.
Michael, is your question on this point? Because otherwise I'll take from the chat and come back to you if it's a different question.
No, it is on this point. Richard.
Hi.
The annual profile of the grid has obviously that diurnal variation, day to night, but over the year, in winter, its peak currently is only about 30% higher than its summertime value.
Yes, yes.
In the future, it's not going to be anything like 30% higher than the summer value. It's going to be 2.5 times the summer value, is it not?
Well, it depends. There's so many parameters. With global warming, we're going to have less cold winters, aren't we?
And I accept, and we'll maybe also have an additional air conditioning load.
Air conditioning, yes, that's right. Yes.
But nevertheless, so it won't be 30% more.
Yeah.
Right. So if you had £5,000 in your pocket, burning a hole, need to spend it, but it's only £5,000.
Yeah.
Which way to go? A battery or a solar array on your roof?
Personally, I'd go for a battery. Yeah, because that
is the correct answer.
Yes. You've got more control. It gives you much more control and flexibility. You become a prosumer, a producer consumer. You can consume electricity when it's cheap, and you can sell it when it's expensive. Just having the battery in the future. That's not really easy to do at the moment, but okay. I would say battery. Yeah.
Okay, well, I agree with you, but now I'm going to challenge.
Yes, good.
Because that battery is essentially aimed at leveling our load.
It is,
which is obviously good for the DNO.
Yeah.
Whereas a solar panel does exactly the opposite. Makes it more peaky.
Yeah.
But if that power is coming from the North Sea, and the huge majority of it will be.
Yeah.
We have to fill in the two weak high pressure gaps, and we haven't really touched upon that this evening. But storage is going to have to play a part in that too.
Yes. Yeah.
And I would suggest to you that it's not at the house end.
Yeah.
That storage will be located. It might be at a community level.
Yes.
We already see proposals of that. That's certainly the way that things are going in South Australia, where things are happening pretty fast.
Lots of sun.
But if you had, for example, and it won't be lithium ion, and it might be some kind of iron flow or some other form of battery technology.
Yeah.
If that is placed at a community level, say at the substation or wherever.
Yeah.
Isn't that going to undermine the economics of your home battery, because it will have already served the purpose of filling the gap and leveling the load?
Yes, you're right. Yeah, so that's what I keep saying. There's lots and lots of parameters, lots of variables here that are really difficult to predict what's going to happen in the next 10 years. It's a sort of Betamax VHS thing going on, isn't it? We got the green hydrogen, the blue hydrogen. Yeah, we've got grid storage, what you just described there, local storage. You got community solar, you got residential solar, the pump storage, lots and lots. Whatever we do with nuclear will have a big impact on this as well. But that continues to sort of blow hot and cold. So I'd agree. And I'm not sure we've got to choose the horse and no to bet on. I think we've got to be flexible. At the end of the day, this is simple. You got to turn things up. You got to turn things down. That's all that's happening here. You got to turn your battery up or you're down, or your solar up or down by the sun coming and going. They're just inputs and outputs, similar to the water system. You got a reservoir pumping down, you got pressure in the water, and you got people with taps. So it's very, very similar to that. But in the future, we're going to have different ways of storing water. The equivalent, in that analogy, we got a reservoir, we got a tank we could build, a huge tank the size of a football pitch, whatever it is to store water, and we got a similar thing with electricity. So the interestingly, if I was an entrepreneur, and I was thinking about where am I going to place my money, I would be really nervous right now, because there are so many horses that are running here. And it's not obvious which one's going to die and which one's going to grow into, the big winner that everybody will remember. It's the Betamax thing. Nobody, some people thought Betamax. Let's invest in Betamax, and it was just the wrong horse, wasn't it? And we don't have a Chinese system here where somebody's in power for 30 years and they can have a 30-year plan. Yeah, we have a very very different system where the prime minister is in charge for a month, and then you change tack. So we got the political system, which doesn't help. Yeah, the central plan system would suit us much better if we wanted a 30-year plan, which is probably the way we would get to net zero in 2050. So we got the market, the complexity of the markets, all the different consumer markets, the sort of vested interest and all sorts of things at play here. But we do know, as a human race, we will solve this. Yes, we just don't know with what at the moment. So I'm very confident that we will solve it. We're going to have power cuts along the way, but we'll get to a point where the power cuts will disappear again. Which I think it's a turbulent period of maybe 5 to 10 years where these things will play out. Yeah, and the eventual winners, and it'll probably be multiple winners, not just one, will appear, and it will be obvious. Now we're still waiting for fusion, aren't we? You never know. Fusion might come up on the blind side, and just save us all by 2040.
Yep.
Well, I can remember as a child, fusion was going to make electricity so cheap you didn't need to meter it. And now, all these decades later, it still hasn't happened. I'm going to take a couple of questions from the chat and then come back to Tony. So, from the chat, Liz says, what do you think about putting washing machines and dishwashers on overnight? Usually they have timers on them. And then another person, Laurie, has asked, and how might the neighbours react if you did that?
Yeah. So I think take that second one first. Life is going to be different. Yeah, and you may be hearing your neighbour's washing machine at 3 a.m. Yeah, and we have to get to a state of mind where we say, "Wow, that's good. They're doing the right thing." Yeah, so that's a small example of how life's going to change, in my view. Yeah, if I knew exactly what was going to happen, then I'd be very rich. But a good example of the sort of things that 24/7 use of electricity in a controlled way, software controlled, AI, machine learning, all that stuff. Advances in AI, machine learning are going at an incredible rate. Yeah, so I think we should have confidence that we can work out how to stop me going around switching everything off and switching it back on again at 5 to 6 because Octopus said, to home energy management systems been able to sort this out. Now the Hive and the Nests of this world, they're 80% there. So the washing machine over on at night, my washing machine I control from my phone. You can buy those now. I've had one for a year where you switch it on from the phone. So we just need a little bit more step to link that to the home energy management system. So it's the home energy management system switches it on, not me from my phone. Yeah. So the technology is there. The price point isn't there as ever because it's early. Yeah, but the price point will get up to a point where it's mass volumes, high volume, mass market stuff, because it'll be the norm.
Great. Well,
my view.
I hope that answers both of those.
Yeah.
Let's have Tony's question. You're still on mute, Tony.
Thank you. I'm unmuted now.
Great.
This is fascinating. It's been an incredible discussion. It's just kind of reinforced my sort of funny feeling that having spent the first half of my career on researching inventory management systems, it's all coming back home.
Oh, good.
because that's tactically that's what's happening. It's just a massive inventory management system with lots of players. But
right,
the point I wanted to make was that can we continue speculating in this way without saying anything about the relevance of government strategy. You know,
Yeah.
Haven't we got to pin this onto a government strategy? And if we don't, then it's like the Wild West for the next 20 years.
Yeah, that's right. No, you're absolutely right. So you can get very political, and I will just for a minute. You either go with the party that believes the market will sort it, yeah, or you go with the party that says, actually, we need a plan. Yeah, and you can say, well, that's socialist, that's communist, central planning, or whatever. Yeah, but my personal view is I don't think at this point the market will take us where we need to go.
No, I agree.
Yeah. There has to be some central plan. That's why I said that China will have a central plan, Russia will have a central plan, yeah, and they're able to control stuff. We just let entrepreneurs win or lose or fail or make billions because they actually chose the right horse to back, and it's the Wild West. I agree, it's the Wild West. If we had a nuclear strategy that says no, we're not, or we're going full on or half on, then we'd be in a much better place today.
Well, relying on the market is a cop-out, isn't it, really?
It is. Yeah.
And there is such a thing as a mixed economy. There is such a thing as a middle road, which is very hard work. Very,
because you don't get voted in again, do you? is the problem. They're tough messages. Who's going to vote for power cuts?
Yeah. Not
many people will vote for a power cut. But it's just the sort of growing pains we will have to go through. And I can't speak for the suppliers, but certainly the DNOs are, because they are responsible for most of the power cuts, the unplanned power cuts. The regulator and I think the employees as well, and the senior managers are very focused on vulnerable people. Yeah, making sure that they are protected, and we understand what's important to them. If they're on kidney dialysis, they've got 3 kids under the age of 3, or whatever they are, in terms of having to be treated in an appropriate way. I am seeing some very good signs of the DNOs doing the right thing, putting the right investment into the support mechanisms that are required for planned power cuts. With Storm Arwen, which was this day 1 year ago, because I know it really, really well, because I was off power for 4 days. Storm Arwen, there were some incredible lessons learned there about what can be done, what has to be done for vulnerable people. And there are many, many different categories of vulnerability, and a lot of focus is put into making sure that the people who are vulnerable, the impact of that on them is minimised, and that they get their power back as quickly as a priority. Yeah. So yeah, there's it's going to be a little bit rough and tumble, I think, for a few years, but also unfortunately combined with recession and the COVID fallout and all that good stuff. It's going to be quite a stormy few years, I think.
Well, let's go on to Jamie, and then I'll ask another question myself. Jamie.
Thanks. I don't know. Well, I'm going to babble on for a second and see if it turns into a question.
Yes.
I guess. I mean, first of all, it's been really interesting to listen to you and hear your thoughts. I think a lot of the problem is that most people want to do something, whether that's becoming, something simple like using electricity at the right time to, retrofitting the houses to home energy systems. But there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of what is the best thing to do. So most people want to do something, but they're limited in the money that they've got.
They are.
So, I'm sat here, I've got £6,000 to spend on something. I've got solar panels, do I get batteries? Do I put that forward to a grant for an air source heat pump? Do I look at a home energy system? Do I listen to the person who's phoning me up every week saying I should get loft insulation? You know, and get, you know, foam loft insulation or whatever they're you know, there's a lot of people selling into this market.
Yes.
And I think there's an awful lot of confusion. So, and I can imagine if people are, you know, affluent, they're in a position to do all of the above.
They are.
But we're heading towards that segregation of society based on their energy. You know, that some people be able to get their home energy systems in, retrofit their house and everything. Some people might be able to do some elements, and then you've got the people at the far end who probably won't be able to adjust their energy use, probably paying higher tariffs.
Yes, they are.
So, I mean,
and they're on a prepay meter as well.
Yeah. So how do we make the right choices? I mean, you know, where do we go to look at the right choices? Because if I get an air source heat pump engineer around my house, he'll say, "Oh yeah, put that money towards an air source heat pump. They're brilliant." If I've got someone who's fitting batteries, but "Oh yeah, you've got solar panels, get some batteries into your house."
Yep.
Everyone's telling you what to do, but there doesn't seem to be anywhere where it's saying, you know, some sort of flow diagram where you say, do this, and it goes down and comes out and says, right, this is your situation, bish bash bosh, we end all the information, and it comes out at the bottom, this sort of, just get some triple gazing or something. It's
this, and I think what we have to get to is that what you've described as the flow chart. Yes, because for me, I live in Hayfield, very comfortable terrace house. I work for an electricity company, so I'm very comfortable. That the answer for me is different, isn't it, to somebody who's on a prepay meter trying to work out whether to buy food or put money in the meter. Yeah, and we as a society don't have that level of understanding and sophistication to target the messages in the right way. It's a blanket. You need to get one of these, get one of these, get one of these. Before you know it, it's 50 grand. Yeah, and you know, people want to understand how to. Some people want to understand how to reduce their bills, and by paying 50 grand, you don't even start, do you? Some people want to be as green as possible because they're absolutely committed to net zero, stop the oil, you know, Extinction Rebellion, and all that, and they'll target and do the thing which will make the biggest impact on their carbon footprint. Others just want toys because they got the Ferrari and they want all the bells and whistles. In my mind, the key thing is that we go at the right pace with the right message to the right people, and you know, do we let the market work that out in the Wild West, or do we have some? I think somebody's mentioned mixed economy, more centrally planned approach, or not. So some big decisions politically. I think the other way to think about this, one of the very first slides I put up that said we need to repair, reuse, recycle, and then replace, yes, and put the air source heat pump. Do those other things first, I think. Yeah, I think there's growing momentum around like eBay. The way eBay now positions itself as green, yes, because they're pre-loved material things, yes, which is a brilliant green message, isn't it? It's low carbon. We got to get away from growth. The way out of this is growth. I'm sorry, I think you got to turn around and go 180 degrees the other way. The way out of this is to reuse. All those reuse, repair, recycle, they ain't going to drive growth. It's the opposite. So I would start with those things that are important first: reuse, recycle, repair. Do all those things, and then once you've either lost interest or done everything, then it's time to look at replacing your car with electric vehicle if you've got £20,000, or the air source heat pump if you've got the 10 grand. Right now, to replace, because manufacturing is carbon intensive, replacing things is counterproductive. Yeah, replacing things when the manufacturing process is low carbon itself, then that's less of an issue in my mind. But we all it's very easy to preach and reduce your carbon footprint. I'm off to Austria in 10 days' time. I'm flying. My carbon footprint's going to be crazy. So no, it's that's why I say life's going to be very different.
I think there's some acknowledgement that one should do fabric first, insulate your home, then reduce your decarbonize your power, and then finally generate. But you're right that a lot of people start with the solar panels and then go in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask a question and then I'll bring in Laurie. So you said that there's inevitably power cuts.
Yes.
In the good old days, one had other forms of heating at home, and it didn't matter too much because you'd actually light your little fire or whatever. Do you have any, as we go more and more over to electricity, we're more and more dependent if the power goes off. A gas boiler today doesn't work even if the gas is still on with a power cut. So do you have any tips for managing these power cuts at our individual home level?
Yeah, so there's the expensive way, which is by battery storage, solar panel. Yeah, so that's the off-grid thing, isn't it? How off-grid can you get? And there'll be I think a growing focus on that off-grid thing. I remember 10 years ago going to a conference and standing up and saying the world is off-grid to a load of DNOs. I was verbally covered in tomatoes when I said that. But it's a natural endpoint of what we're talking about here. Resilience. Resilience. There's going to be power cuts. So how am I going to be resilient to a power cut? I got to have a battery. Electric vehicle is my battery, yeah. Or I buy a Tesla battery or whatever's in the future, whatever comes along next gen. Remember, battery technology is going to change. Just like
there's not enough lithium in the world for us all to have lithium batteries, so it's got to change.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Let's bring in Laurie at this point, and then FK can have a go.
You're on mute.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, Richard.
Hi there.
Yes. Just picking up on the point that Jamie was making, really, just 2 points about that, and then a question to you about the Wild West.
Yes.
This notion of two-tier society, three-tier society, very stratified society, depending on how much you know, how much money you've got, and so on. If I recall rightly, and it wasn't everywhere, but 20, 30 years ago, local authorities, remember local authorities? We know they've been emasculated, but quite a number of local authorities had something called something like energy advice centres, where there was the possibility of obtaining impartial, hopefully reasonably authoritative advice about one's options depending on one's circumstances.
Yeah.
And when Tony was saying about middle way, central plan versus the Wild West, it does seem to me that local authorities, which are trusted, impartial bodies, they may not be very dynamic, but they have a place in people's understandings. There may be a role for them there.
Yeah,
and the need for that was demonstrated, as you know, Richard, and there's some other people participating. Now, I too am from Sustainable Hayfield, and the home energy MOT system we've got going I was talking to the project worker there this afternoon, who was talking about in our reasonably comfortable community of Hayfield, coming across the lady living alone, whose home was at 14.3 degrees C, according to the home thermometer.
Yeah.
She has the heating on for 1 hour. That's all she says she's comfortable having it on with. She's obviously at risk of hypothermia.
Yeah.
In those temperatures if she's not moving around. And when the project worker was saying, but you know, you're getting £67 a month towards your energy bill, you know, your council tax rebate was £150, you know, because of your circumstances, you're getting an additional £500. She could not understand, apparently, could not understand all of that and what it might mean for her and the decisions that she can take and the choices that she has available to her.
Yeah.
So her need for, dare I say it, protection from all these opportunistic entrepreneurs driven by short-term motivations is enormous, enormous. And I guess she is not alone. There are many others, less extreme circumstances.
There needs to be an advocate, doesn't there? I think for these people.
There needs to be an available service. Exactly, yes. And there are probably, I mean, there's a continuum, isn't there? There's going to be people who are like your mate, who's very up to the market and sorts himself out, no problem at all. And there's lots of people who don't and can't.
Yeah.
That's just two sort of sermonizing points, really. But I then wanted to ask you a question about the Wild West that you were talking about. You haven't mentioned tonight, and I understand why. I think there's a parallel development going on around government, isn't there? Haven't they consulted on the future structure of the market? You talked about the stability of the national grid and the assuring presence of the DNOs and so on. But isn't government in fact looking to break up some parts of that system? And what might that mean for consumers?
Yeah, this would be structural change. Yeah. So the way.
Actually, just a second. I've got so interested in all of this. I've realised we over the time technically. Okay. So if people need to leave, do so. But if you're willing to stay on, Richard, and people who still have questions want to ask them, and you reply, that's great.
Oh, that's fine. So there's very likely to be some structural change. Whether it's in the next 5 years or the next 10 years isn't clear. The government hasn't decided, but it won't be their decision because there'll be another government anyway. So we're back to that problem, whereby the parts of Electricity Northwest and Western Power that goes and fixes the cables and the transformers will be split off from the part of that company that protects the assets, make sure the temperature doesn't increase. So that will make a significant difference, because making sure an asset doesn't fail through risk management is a very, very different thing to making sure that the power cuts are minimized, or the companies that are prepared to switch off their load do so and get paid. That they're two very, very different roles, and the government is going to make some decisions in the next 5 years, I think, that says how we're going to split this out. I think we'll always have a national grid, which is basically the high voltage backbone, because that's the cheapest way of moving electricity around the country from the big generators. And we'll always have the companies that look after the low voltage networks in your road, in your street. But there will be some structural change. I firmly believe that the bit of the business that maintains the wires and the transformers will be nationalized. They're just going to be financially not viable as we go more and more off grid. They just won't have the income to keep all the equipment. There's a growing amount of equipment serviceable. So lots of change. Well, we know there's some change coming, and that's the half-hourly stuff. That's happening definitely. The next step, which is probably in the next 10 years, which could end up with nationalisation and big restructuring, just depends on who wins the next 2 elections, I think.
And what does that mean? Anything in particular for the consumer?
I think be transparent. The consumers are only interested in the bill and the power cuts. No, you just want electricity there when you plug it in, and you want to know how much you pay. So what all the complexity of all what we've been talking about tonight is totally just a black art to 99% of consumers, I think. But you can't believe anything a politician of any colour tells you. Yeah, running up to an election, you just can't, can you? We know that now. So it's not. There's no point listening to it really. As a consumer, I just want to know my bills. Remember, Laurie, about 8 years ago, we had this an education session on smart meters. What are these things? And I stood up and said, bear in mind, everybody, electricity is going to double in price. Yeah. People are, oh, no, I don't think so. It's like, and some. Yeah. So it's, let's just assume it's going to double again.
Yeah?
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, did you have a follow-up there, Laurie?
No.
Okay. FK, I'm not sure what your full name is, but do ask your question. You're on mute at the moment, FK.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, that's better. My name is Famida Kondukar. I work at Cardiff Metropolitan University as a researcher on a project called MISS, is to do with marine renewable energy excellence center. So it's just listening to everybody, I could quite see that the things are quite serious than the broken yellow line, isn't it? So that's what I was wondering, and how did we actually get here? That's what I was wondering as well. So I could actually see, I was listening to the seminar when I was driving, and so I probably missed a bit, but I could see the main issue is there is a high imbalance between the demand for electricity and the supply, the electricity that is being generated. So there is a high imbalance, high gap, and that's becoming probably higher, and that's contributing to the problem. So that, obviously, so my question would be, how did we get here to that critical stage?
Yeah.
The other, just some comments I have, so I could quite see that there couldn't be a better time to explore marine renewable energy projects, the potential and investing on these projects from the government, given that things got to that stage. The other thing I could quite see is that there are certainly issues with modernizing the electrical system. We have to automate some of the processes to make sure that the way we are consuming energy becomes more efficient. And obviously there are certain issues, behavioral issues, in terms of the way we are using electricity. So again, my question would be that, how did we get here?
Yes. So the way I view this is we got here because we didn't have a nuclear strategy or a coal strategy or a hydro strategy that would give us guaranteed generation. Yes. So we decided that we didn't want to follow France.
Okay.
or Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Down the nuclear route because of all the issues with nuclear. We didn't want to continue with our coal strategy because it works against our stated objective to get to net zero 2050. So we have to come out of coal. Yeah, we could have changed our nuclear strategy and said, well, we're coming out of coal, so we're going to go nuclear. But we never got off the fence on that. So we've ended up in that place where you probably don't want to be, which is you can't guarantee the sun's going to shine and the wind's going to blow where you need it to. Yeah. So that's the fundamental issue, unless we cover the North Sea in turbines, yeah, where we will guarantee some base level of generation even when the wind's very, very low, yeah. But clearly that's never going to happen. So all we have to do, all we have to do is
Yes.
to match our consumption with the generation.
Yeah, of course.
That's what we have to do, and we have what Michael Corcoran said. We can sort of flatten this stuff out by storing electricity or storing energy when we've got too much, and then using that stored energy when we haven't got enough. So the technologies are sort of nearly there. They will develop and they'll get better. And we'll be able to smooth that out. But we have to end up consuming only when we've got generation, and that's the simple equation that has to be drawn. It's so complex, politically, engineering, software control to actually make that happen perfectly, such that we don't have power cuts as we learned. Yeah.
That means in future we would need more like sensor-based appliances and probably solar-powered appliances, integrated solar-powered appliances.
Sensors. We have to cover the country in sensors to know the temperature, the luminosity, the wind. Yeah, we have to get much. We've got a 10 pixel camera on our country. We need a 10 megapixel camera to actually see what's there. Yeah.
I see.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I see people are still asking new questions, which I hadn't properly anticipated when I said it's after time.
All right. Yeah.
So I will take these last two. There's one in the chat and there's one from Tony, but I'm afraid I'm going to say to everybody else, even if you suddenly thought of a burning issue, you'll have to save it for another day. So the one in the chat from Steve Platt, he notices one of the listeners has a hat on, which could mean that she's reduced her consumption, and that they also have reduced theirs. The chat keeps moving. Does Northern Power feel this reduction is significant? Is it desirable for Northern Power as a business or a possible threat to their business if consumption continues to fall? And what are the obstacles to a European-wide grid with Norway supplying hydro, France nuclear, Iceland geothermal, Spain solar and UK wind?
Yeah, so the first question, Electricity Northwest, I think, not Northern Power, but because there is another company called Northern Power Grid that looks after
Sorry, yes, it's me. Susie, I don't know why Steve's face is up there. I think it's because I've come through on the Hope Valley Climate Action Zoom.
Oh.
Sorry, it's me. I'm not okay.
Yeah, so
the second question is from Steve, I think, but I don't know anyway.
Yeah. So that question, are Electricity Northwest incentivized to take us down this route to reduced consumption? And the answer is absolutely not. No, because revenues will drop. The costs of managing the grid will grow because it's getting more complex, and the business model will fail. That's in 20 years' time, I don't know, 15 years' time, but that's the off-grid position, which means it's financially impossible. and they will be nationalised because of that, because it's critical national infrastructure. We can't take it away. It still has to be there. So it's part of the infrastructure that will need to be funded, and it can't be funded by consumers. There's just not enough. That was the first one. The second one, the European grid. So
Yeah.
So there is a European grid. So we buy and sell electricity with France, Holland, Norway. It is there. I think it will become more sophisticated, more flexible. Clearly, there's a policy decision to be made, because we don't want to buy electricity off Poland, because they're 10 times more carbon emissions than we have at certain times of the day. No, we should be buying all our electricity off Norway, yeah, because it's the most environmental friendly, it's the least carbon, and it's like 28 grams instead of our 380 grams of carbon. So I think it's a major part of the future, but we can't get ourselves into the same hellhole that we got ourselves in with Russia, buying gas energy from Russia. So it's not necessarily a simple answer, but no, a friendly country today like Norway, you'd expect them to be fairly friendly for the next 100 years or so. And no, I think Norway are in a very good position. They could build hydro. Locally, they may not in my backyard type issues could arise if they're going to flood another valley or something like that. But no, they have the ability to generate masses of electricity at incredibly low carbon. France probably less so because of all the issues with nuclear waste. Low carbon, but massive environmental issues.
Indeed. Okay, thank you, Tony. And this will be the very last question of this evening.
Just a very quick response to the dialogue between Richard and FK about matching supply and demand and how do we get here. It reminded me of something from my old infantry control days, and that is you can't plan your way out of a capacity shortage.
Oh yes.
And if you try, it's very messy and very expensive.
Yeah, you're right. Yes.
And when I think of all those diesel engines firing up, and buying capacity and all that, it sounds an awful way to solve the problem. Now,
it is.
Now, I mean, it goes back to the notion of some central planning, I suppose. Can we have a strategy which actually provides adequate capacity, and then a lot of the problems just fall away?
I think you're right. Yes, I'm absolutely convinced we will end up there. Yeah, it's just we're going to make some mistakes on the way. Oh, we're making some mistakes now in terms of lack of certainty on nuclear and various different things. But I'd agree. It's messy. It's expensive. You end up paying a lot of money using those certain reserve types of capacity, which you only use now and again. I think there's some jet engines in just near Milton Keynes, which is the absolute last resort. Now, if we absolutely run out of everything, we've got nothing left, we fire up these jet engines to power a generator, but it costs the earth, both in terms of carbon and in terms of the money as well. But when you get into that corner case, no, it is messy. And we have to have something which is much more predictable and controlled and planned and automated. And we're just not there. We're quite early days. This is why I say we're going to go through a big change. And our lives are going to change. Just because we got to hit net zero, not because the electricity industry is changing to achieve it, but no, all the way through. So buy stuff off eBay. Don't go to Amazon. Basically, it's if there's something that's got 10 years life in it, but it's secondhand, then and get it. And I heard there's quite a lot of interest in a new phone that has just hit the market, which is a very green phone, which you actually repair. Yeah,
you mean the Fairphone?
Fairphone, that one, yes.
That's been around a little while, but I think they may have got a new model out.
Yes, so that sort of different attitude and approach to material, manufacturing, and thinking about the lifetime cost. Let's not have phones you throw away after a year. Yeah, let's have phones you can repair and keep going for 10 years and be proud of it.
So Michael says the demand for electricity will not fall for decades. Oh, it's gone off my screen.
The demand for electricity will not diminish for decades. The intention of the power companies will sell as many terawatt hours as they can per gigawatt of its capacity.
Yes, yeah, you're right. Yeah, no question. They're incentivized to do that. The shareholders. Yeah.
So lots of people saying thank yous in the chat, which is why it scrolled off. I'm also going to add my thank you. It's been great to have you. The discussion part has been particularly interesting and exciting, and in a way, it's a pity you had to cover the background because we could have done more of the discussion, but it certainly was useful to bring everybody up to speed. So thank you for that initial input. It was good to also, it's a refresher for some of us who perhaps heard some of it before. So, as I say, great. Thank you very, very much. I'm sure we've all appreciated it, and thanks for coming and doing it.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Is any of you still three there? Oh, I should turn off recording.